Howdy again everyone, and today I'm happy to present you with one of my favourite things, a new fast standard zoom lens for aps-c cameras. Here we have the Nikon Z DX 16-50mm f2.8 VR, and yes, that VR does mean that the lens is image stabilized, which is also really cool to see. Not to mention important, as none of Nikon's DX cameras have their own in-body stabilization, so this could be a real dream lens for Nikon stills and video shooters who are using one of their smaller DX cameras with their aps-c sized cropped sensors. It costs $900 or £800 here in the UK. I'd like to thank Nikon UK for loaning me this lens for a couple of weeks for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. They haven't had any input into the video at all. This thing's zoom range of a nice wide 16mm to a short telephoto 50mm is the full frame equivalent of 24 to 75mm, so while it's obviously not a super zoom lens, you're still getting a nice zoom range here, which will be useful for all kinds of work, but the headline feature really is its maximum aperture of f2.8. That means the lens lets in nearly twice as much light as the 16 to 50mm kit optic at its widest angles, and over 4 times more light when you're zoomed in, which makes it much easier to shoot with in dark conditions, easier to get out of focus backgrounds as well. Nice! A lens like this can really help your little aps-c camera to fly. The first thing I noticed when physically handling the lens is that it's not very big, and at only 330 grams or about 3/4 pound, it's actually surprisingly lightweight. I mean, here's the first fast standard aps-c zoom lens that I ever bought back in 2010. Quite a difference, right? The lens is mostly made of plastic, but it actually feels quite solid and tough, and it's based on a metal lens mount edged with a weather sealing gasket. At the rear you get a customizable control ring, which turns very smoothly. When your camera is set to manual focus, then it controls your focus, of course. It responds quite well to being turned, if a little slowly, but the really good news here for video makers is that the lens displays almost no focus breathing, whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out. That's a nice bit of optimization there. I'm also pleased to say that the lens's autofocus is silent, accurate and very fast, as you can see here. When it comes to image stabilization, I can't tell for sure how effectively it works on its own, because my Z7's sensor stabilization combines with the lenses in use, but for what it's worth, here's some footage without stabilization, and here it is turned on anyway, where of course we see a fantastically steady image even at 50mm. Towards the front of the lens we get a broad, rubberized zoom ring. It's quite sticky to turn, to be honest, not very smooth. The lens comes with quite a large plastic hood, and its filter thread size is 67mm. Overall, apart from the slightly sticky zoom ring, the build quality of this optic is great, and its excellent autofocus, low focus breathing, small size, and image stabilization all combine to make it a pretty desirable lens to handle. More importantly though comes image quality. At the time of writing, Nikon's highest resolution DX sensor for their mirrorless cameras is only 20 megapixels in resolution, so I'll be testing it on a 20 megapixel DX mode of my Nikon Z7 camera. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At 16mm and f2.8, the lens is razor sharp in the middle with excellent contrast. Over in the corners, the image looks a bit hazier, a bit softer, possibly due to chroma smearing, although the image is still pretty decent. f4 looks about the same, but at f5.6 we see a bit more clarity and contrast emerging. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, where a little softness creeps in due to diffraction. Let's zoom in halfway to 30mm. Again at f2.8, image quality is excellent in the middle. So let's look into those corners. Again, they are noticeably softer, but not too bad. Stopping down to f4, f5.6 and f8 brings about tiny improvements that lead to noticeably better image quality there, although those corners still aren't quite as sharp as the middle. Finally, let's zoom all the way in. At 50mm and f2.8, the lens is, again, fantastically sharp in the middle with excellent contrast. Over in the corners, like at 16mm, the image looks a bit hazier, a bit softer, possibly due to chroma smearing, although the image is still pretty decent. f4 looks much better though, and at f5.6 the image looks as sharp as it did in the middle. Overall, this lens always shows fantastic image quality in the middle of your pictures. I was hoping for a bit more sharpness in the corners at brighter apertures, but admittedly they're not too bad. I suspect that Nikon were prioritizing a small lens size and focus breathing correction over optics here, rather than out and out corner sharpness, perhaps to appeal to more video makers, but honestly, still shooters with 20 megapixel cameras will be reasonably satisfied nevertheless. Alright, let's avoid the lens's in-camera corrections by shooting in RAW and looking for distortion and vignetting. As you can see here at 16mm, the lens's barrel distortion is wild, and its vignetting is pretty out of control too. Stop down to f4, f5.6 or f8 to see that vignetting slowly pushed back into the image corners. Zoom in to 24mm to see that distortion straighten out. At 50mm it flips into some pretty gnarly pincushion distortion, and again we get heavy vignetting at f2.8. Stop down to f4 or f5.6 to see those corners brighten up. Even for a fast standard zoom lens though, this is a terrible performance. You will definitely want to make sure your images and video footage are being corrected here, either in camera or in post. Moving on quickly, I'm happy to mention that this lens has a very close minimum focus distance for capturing images of smaller subjects, and that's whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out. Here's a close-up image at 16mm, even at f2.8, picture quality is still razor sharp, well, at least in the middle. How about we zoom into 50mm then? At f2.8, close-up image quality is much softer now, but if you stop down to f4 or especially f5.6, brilliant sharpness quickly returns. Let's see how the lens works against bright light. It's a somewhat poor performance here. Whether you're zoomed out or zoomed in, quite a lot of flaring is being thrown up by bright light within your image. Thankfully, there don't seem to be additional problems with lights just outside of your image, but still, I was hoping for a bit better here. While we're working in the dark, let's take a look for coma and sun stars. As I guessed from the image sharpness results, bright points of light in the image corners are indeed showing some smearing to them, although I've seen worse than this. Stop down just to f4 though, and that smearing quickly clears up. Let's zoom out then and look for sun stars. They begin to emerge at f8. At f11, f16 and f22, they get pretty big. Next, bokeh. Good news here, this lens's out of focus backgrounds look lovely and soft to me. It's very rare for you to see any kind of outlining or harshness to them, even on bright specular highlights. Nice. And finally, related to bokeh, let's take a look at longitudinal chromatic aberration. When shooting at f2.8, there's an average amount to be seen, some blue and magenta fringing on bokeh highlights here, but nothing too dreadful. At f4 it's virtually gone, and at f5.6 it's basically cleared up. Overall, the Nikon Z DX 16-50mm f2.8 VR was really enjoyable to test out, but did leave me with slightly mixed feelings. It's a fun and useful lens for sure, and it'll certainly do a brilliant job for video work. Stills photographers will enjoy the lens as well, but might be a bit disappointed at its corner image sharpness and definitely somewhat strong flaring, especially the lens costs $900 and one or two RAW shooters might be unhappy with its distortion and vignetting. I do like this lens definitely, and it will have a lot of happy owners, but still shooters should take those optical issues into consideration before buying. Did you enjoy that lens review? Well, you weren't really supposed to, it's more of an avant-garde piece, but if you do find yourself watching my reviews often and finding them helpful, then check out my Patreon page or channel subscriptions down in the description below, where you can support the work that I do and find all kinds of exclusive bonus content, including secret videos only for supporters. Check it out and ciao for now.